Well, hi, everyone. Today is our first ever The MuseCast, and we are so excited that you are here. We invite you to join us every week at 4 o'clock, where Dan and I will be here and we'll just chat with one another and with you about the previous weekend's sermon from Woodland Hills, what stood out to us, some things we think we need to unpack. Also, what questions you may have. We want to answer those for you. And so welcome. We hope that you will continue to join us. And thank you for being here with us and for allowing us into your space wherever you are. And so I'm Shawna Boren, and with me is the amazing Dan Kent. And Dan, why don't you start us off by summarizing that amazing Easter message we heard this past weekend?
Yeah, that was such a great message, and I think if you give sermons, if you're a pastor, one of the things that I liked most about Greg's sermon is he did something that if you can pull it off, it works so well. He found this experience that we all have, and it's not an experience that is defined or talked about a lot, but it's an experience that we all sense, and Greg was able to identify it and then build his whole sermon on that inner experience. And it's such a great tactic. And the experience that he talks about is when someone that we love dies, there is this strange sense of injustice. There's this strange math that takes place in our heart where the way he put it is like it doesn't seem right that something that we love so much, something that is so precious, something that fills our heart with so much joy is suddenly just gone. And it's like, especially in a relationship, you build this relational inertia with somebody and you have this long story, and then all of a sudden it just drops off and it disappears. And there's something inside of us that just senses how profoundly not right that is. And he sort of builds his whole sermon off of that intuition. And I think that's just a beautiful thing. And so kind of like what he says is we have this incongruity between the fact that we all know that life is profoundly precious, but then a lot of times lives get treated as if they're worthless.
Right.
And we end in this sense that seems so worthless. And so how do you explain that profound incongruity? And so he sort of really builds on that incongruity in just a beautiful way. And ultimately, Greg's conclusion in the sermon is that it doesn't seem right in the cosmos, in the physics of life and relationship, that our story should end like that our love story should end in death. It seems like there should be a different ending to all of our love stories. And that's sort of like the thrust of Greg's message. What did you think of it, Shawna?
Yeah, I loved it, of course. Easter is always one of my favorite messages because it is such a message of hope. And like you said, the incongruity of the fact that we know that life is precious, but at the same time, many times, whether it's our life or the lives of those around us or the lives of those we encounter, has been not treated as precious. And to know that there's still a hope for that. And I loved the fact that he used the parable of the lost coin to talk about God's just unrestricted, unfathomable love for us. The fact that he goes to any length to find us, that we are so precious to him. But he doesn't just stop there when he finds us. Like, I thought about how the fact that I have 4 children and all of them collect bobbleheads. And so they are, in windowsills and on bookshelves, and they love getting them, and then they display them. And it's not like they play with them or anything, but it's like, oh, cool, I got this another one to add to my collection. Yeah. And I think that if we look at God's love and his pursuit of us as just a means to an end, right, where he gets us, then it's like we're a collector's item and he just puts us on the shelf. But he's not that way. And Greg talked about how once he finds us, he continues to pursue us. He continues to bestow his love upon us, and so that he can know us fully and love us fully, and then fully restore us to him in his image. And that was such a beautiful picture to me of just God's radical, reckless, beautiful love for us.
Yeah.
Can't beat
Well,
it.
and Yeah, and I think that's a really good insight, because this idea of God is just doing it to meet some need that God has or something. It's like
Right.
then he's seeking us because of himself. It's
Right.
not really us that he loves. He's doing it out of some kind of duty or compulsion. But what the parables talk about is that no, God actually loves us, and he's, he says the lost coin parable right between the lost sheep parable and
Right.
the prodigal son, and in each of those parables it's this love for the lost sheep or the prodigal son that compels God, not some divine cosmic duty that he's just because I am a loving God, I must fulfill all of the sheep. And yeah,
Right.
it really is a love for us, and I think that's a
Right.
really good insight.
Well, yeah, and
Yeah.
nor is it because we've done something wrong, right? Like we're all in our own humanness, we're fallen and we're broken, and there is sin in our life, and he's not chasing after us like to wag his finger at us and be like, "How dare you?" No, but it's out of that immense love that he's like, "Let me make you better. Let
Yeah.
me help the brokenness. Let me set you free from those things that are binding you." And
Yeah.
I don't know, especially today, like 2020, this year, it was such a timely message of hope.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is that, you don't throw a party for something that you find if it's just out of compulsion. You throw a party for something that you think is precious. And in the lost coin parable and in the prodigal son, they both end in a big celebration and party. And I'm sure the sheep one would have also, if sheep were
For
more
sure.
partiers, but they're just not much of partiers.
They're not. They
So
fall
no.
over and just
You're right. Yeah.
Oh,
Good.
that's good. How do you feel about answering a couple of questions that
I would love it. I'm looking forward to this, and
okay.
I'm really looking forward to in the future getting some of these questions too. So,
I know. I know. You
do you
guys save.
remember? I forgot how do people send in the questions? I totally forgot.
Yeah, so they can starting next week if they want to send them in the chat on YouTube, they can do that, and we'll try to grab those. But the easiest way is to mail them to us at MuseCast at whchurch.org. So, and we'll get
Cool.
those throughout the week, and we can start diving into those.
Yeah, let's. This is a production meeting right now. Let's remember to put that email in the notes of the video. So
Yep. Is our producer going to do that?
I think I don't know. Probably.
Some intern or something.
Yeah, it's funny. Let's send that to the production
Yeah,
department as if we're like this big
I
corporation.
know.
That's
I don't know. We'll get it in there though, so people will know where to
right.
email for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So Dan, we've been talking about how this Easter message for Jesus followers is a message of hope. And for many of us, it's one that we look forward to every year. We celebrate Resurrection Sunday. It's kind of a victory for all of us who love and follow Jesus. But like I said earlier, in the year 2020, especially, it seems, man, you look around and there doesn't seem to be a ton to celebrate or to be hopeful about. So why would you say this Easter message is so hopeful?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's only as hopeful as you believe in the resurrection, I think. But if you come to the point where you believe in the resurrection, I think that the resurrection really serves as the foundation of all of our hopes in Christianity. And the Apostle Paul in I'm taking Greg's advice and I'm using my Bible.
I
So
like it.
not
Good
notice
job.
this is not a Bible app. So
It's the real deal.
yeah, totally. Oh, hold on, I lost it though. I'm a little rusty with the Bible. I've been using it more, but yeah. Okay, so 1 Corinthians 15, verses 15 and 16. When I first read this, it just it really hit me. Like, all of my doubts and all of my concerns is like the apostles get it. The apostles understand this. And what Paul says here is that, look, if Christ has not been raised from the dead, then all of our preaching and all of the religious get-togethers we have, it's all worthless. It's all a silly show is what it is.
Mhm.
And basically all of our hope is pinned on this claim that Jesus rose from the dead, and all of his teachings and all of his promises, they don't really mean anything unless he actually rises from the dead. And so to the extent that we believe that he rose from the dead, we have justification for all of our hopes. And I happen to believe that it's true. And therefore I have this tremendous hope. My stepdad used to say this, and it was so helpful. And if I could tell young guys or girls anything, it's to just think of this. As you're learning a new skill, or maybe learning a new sport or a new instrument, and it can be so frustrating to learn these things. My stepdad used to say, if other people can do it, so can you. Now, that's not always true, but it's a great principle to guide yourself, because look, how come he can do it? If he can do it, I can do it. But if you're trying to do something that nobody else has done, there is this sense in which, well, maybe nobody can do this. Maybe nobody can jump 20 feet. Why am I in the yard jumping up and down so much? Maybe I'm trying to do something that's impossible. But if you find out that somebody was able to do it, well, now suddenly, okay, well, maybe I can figure it out too. With Christ, I think it's very similar. It's like this idea of eternal life is such a fairy tale idea. It's such a almost too good to be true sort of idea, because you just see how so many lives just end in a car crash of life. I mean, it's just over. It's just like that. And so why should I think that this promise of eternal life is true? Well, Jesus rose from the dead. It's like someone else has done it. And if someone else can do it, it might be true for you also. It's possible. And all of our hopes are based on that, I think.
I love that. I think several years ago, there was this kind of gospel-y song talking about how I have to believe. And I think of the resurrection. I think of the tomb being rolled away as the ultimate moving of a mountain. Yeah. And in the song, she says, I have to believe that if he can move mountains, he can move my mountain, and he can move your mountain too. And so it is the ultimate testimony of what the power and the sovereignty of God's love can do, like resurrect life from death. So cool.
Amen. Good question.
Yeah. All right. So Greg said in his sermon that love, not death, is the final word. What does that mean? Can you unpack that for us, Dan?
Yeah, well, here I wrote some notes on that. I was a little prepared for this one.
Look at you, you're so studious.
I know. Well, and it was such a great narrative. It was such a great template to look at life and the scriptures through. So this really connected with me. But so again, this kind of builds on this idea that, how should a love story end? And you think of all the movies that we watch, and all of them, the love story ends in marriage. That's like 99% of movies. The hero finds the girl or guy and they get married, and then end credits. No love story ends in one of them dying. I mean, that's like a tragedy. I mean, maybe there might be some dark movies like that, but
Nicholas Sparks, he does that a lot.
Oh, see, okay, spoiler alert.
Sorry.
But most stories, love stories, we hunger to see the relationship come together in union, and death is such an anticlimactic end to a story, and so the question is would God do this profound bait and switch in our lives? Would God set our hearts in motion toward one another and toward him with this hunger for relationship and this hunger for this agape love relationship? And then just the closer and closer you get to it, he pulls the rug out and ends the whole thing before we have this union. If you believe in a God, it just doesn't seem like that's how he would end any love story. And so there's that, I have this picture, and I was going to share it here, but it's just, in one sense, it's the most haunting picture I've ever seen. And in another sense, it's the most beautiful picture I've ever seen. And what it is it's this cardboard box, and it's full of wedding rings. And they all are just like these gold wedding rings. And what it was this box of wedding rings that was confiscated in Buchenwald concentration camp. And there's got to be 1,000 wedding rings in there. And you look at that, and you look at all of those romances and all of those love relationships that were just ended. And all that we have left is this box of rings. And you look at that box and you think, is God really not going to redeem these romances? There's no way God's going to let all of these romances end in such a catastrophic fashion. And I shared this picture on my Facebook page if you want to see it. It's, you just look for author Daniel Kent and it should come up. But I just think that no, death can't be the end of a godly romance. Love has to be the end, not death. And I think that's the point that Greg was really going after in his sermon, is a God would not end a story with like that. He would end it with love.
Yeah. And I love that illustration you just gave, Dan, and just the fact that he cares about that, right? He loves us enough to know what matters to us. And like you said, like those love stories that ended so tragically, like I have to believe too that he cares enough about those love stories that wasn't the final word, right? That love was resurrected somehow.
Yeah. Well, and look at all of the stories in the Old Testament, and how even the really tragic stories are kept in the story. And somehow God is going to take all of these tragic stories, especially like Judges. I mean, what a horrifying book this is, but that's part of our scripture. And that's all stuff that God is going to weave into some beautiful story that's not going to end in the horror of Judges. It's going to end in the beauty of the promises of Jesus, that all of these horrible things are just going to be a faint memory. That's going to be a shadow of how great the love that God is going to have for us and how wonderful our future with God is going to be. And so, yeah, I think that's such a beautiful message if it's true. But again, it all comes back to, did the resurrection really happen? Because if the resurrection didn't really happen, then we have no good reason to think that our story doesn't just end in death. But because we believe that the resurrection happened, there is this hope that our story has a good ending. And that's, I think, the power of Easter.
That's right. And so, Dan, just to make it very clear, we believe that the resurrection is true, right?
Yes.
That's our hope. Amen to that. Well, at the end of his sermon, Greg had one very practical response, and that was to align ourselves with God's love and to receive that. And for those of us who have done that and continue to do that daily with our choices and the lives that we live, what are some other practical ways in which we can live out this resurrected love life with Jesus?
Yeah. I think I have two. And Greg, he just sort of mentioned this verse in passing at the end of the sermon. And I'm like, Greg, that's gotta be one of your verses. You got to put that up there. But
that's
he
why
did
we're
sort of,
here. So
that's right. That's why we're here. That's right. He's given us work. That's perfect. Yeah. Right. But he mentions Philippians 1:5, where Paul says, be confident in this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it through to completion. And so that basically is saying that, the love story is not going to end in death. God's going to bring your story to completion. Death is not completion. Death is an end, but it's not completion. When you think of all of the inertia and all of the things that we work toward in our lives to become more Christ-like, to become better people, those are the things that God still has to complete. Death doesn't complete it; it just ends it. And so the promise that Paul makes basically resonates with this whole message that Greg has, which is, be confident in this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it through to completion. Part of that good work that he began in us, I think, is that set of intuitions that we have that this can't be the end. That's part of what God has planted in our heart to guide us toward a better ending to our story. And so the practical applications from that, the first one is this, to just reflect. This is your homework for this week for people who are watching. Reflect on this. How confident are you that God will bring your story to completion and not just an end in death? Will God actually complete all of those things that you've been working on in yourself and in your heart? And if you're not confident in that, boy, that's an opportunity for growth. Look into that, dig into that soil and find out, why is it that I'm not confident in this? Where do my doubts lurk in this? Because the more confident you are in that, that's, I think, when the joy of faith really starts to blossom. The second thing is this, to be confident in him who has begun a good work in you to carry it through to completion. When you look at other people and in particular, people that you don't like, do you look at them as people who God has begun a good work in, and God is going to bring that good work in them to completion? Because I tell you what, if you can look at other people in that way, where, look, this is not, because a lot of times when we see people we hate, they just become solidified, like that's
Right.
who they are. They're
Right.
just pure evil and wickedness and manipulativeness and whatever, and as if they're never going to grow or change. But
Right.
God began a good work in them too. And this truth that Philippians 1:5 applies to other people, not just us, it helps us to take a step back and look at that bozo or character from a bigger perspective, so that you can see that this is just one spot on their very long romance story. And we're probably seeing them at a really dark time, a really lame time in their growth. And so the second assignment is to just practice looking at people that you don't like from the perspective of Philippians 1:5, that God began a good work in them and is going to see it through to completion. We get the pleasure of seeing them when they're still in the gutter, when they're still maybe horrible people or just mean or heartless or whatever. And we get to see the whole blossom. And so that's what I would encourage people to do.
Those are really good, Dan. I'm just going to say really quickly, I'm from the South, and what you just did there with point 2 is what we call, you've gone from preaching to meddling, because you're telling us that we have to look at those, right, maybe our enemies, as incomplete works of God as well. And ouch, that can be a little more challenging. So thank you for that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking of people right now that, even certain political figures where I'm just like, that's hard. I don't know if I can, but that's, I think, a good spiritual discipline, and
Amen.
That's how we grow. So
amen to
I
that.
hope.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can be encouraged to know that he's not finished with us yet, right? We are, we still have some brokenness in our lives. We still have some things in our lives that we would love for him to resurrect and make new. And the promise is that he will do that. And even if our end comes before we feel like we're complete, that, like you said, that is not the end. That is not our end, because he is faithful. He is forever faithful. And then,
Amen.
I accept your challenge, and I admonish you guys out there as well to accept Dan's challenge too. Let's look at those who it's a little harder to see God at work in them, and let's start believing that God will also complete.
Yeah. And it's also a good opportunity to play on something that Greg preaches on a lot, is to use our inner sanctum, our imagination, and imagine what they're going to be like when God completes them, and how the current scars that they're experiencing are going to be made beautiful. I think that might be another part of this. So
amen to that. Well, we hope that you have enjoyed your time with us. We've enjoyed it. Did you have a good time, Dan?
I had a great time. This is so fun. I'm looking forward to like more of these and more questions and stuff. And
absolutely.
So,
absolutely. Be encouraged. I've said that word a lot today, encourage, but be encouraged, because God is aware of you. He knows exactly where you are in this moment in time, exactly what your circumstances are, and his love is at work. He's not finished with you yet. And so we have that hope that his love will endure. So be encouraged by that. Also, we hope you will join us next week. We'll be here Tuesday afternoon at 4 p.m. Central Time. If you have questions from the sermon that you're going to hear this weekend, we would love to answer them. So all you have to do is email musecast@whchurch.org, and Dan and I will get those questions, and we will get to as many as we can every week. Sound good?
Sounds good to me.
All right. Well, thank you guys. We're really excited to be with you and hope to see you again next week. Bye now.